Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're here for our very second session of exercise prescription or exercise RX for Parkinson's. I'm John Dean. I'm a speech language pathologist specializing in Parkinson's, and here, of course, is the lovely Josefa, who is a physiotherapist who also specializes in Parkinson's. And today we're going to talk about exercise and what is the best exercise for walking in Parkinson's.
Yeah, so I think looking at this topic in a very practical way, I was thinking, okay, so what if, and this happens often, what if I had 30 seconds to answer that question for you? And the quickest answer that I can give you, and will be a key message then for our session, is that the best exercise are those that closely match what you want to improve. Which means that if I want to improve walking, the more the exercise mimics walking patterns or walking itself, the more helpful it will be. And if you think about this, let's say that there's absolutely no obstacle and you can choose between doing a bicycle training or doing a treadmill training. Your goal is to walk. So the closest that of these two activities, if you compare these two activities, the closest one to walking is obviously training on a treadmill. Make sense? But now if I think about even closer to the treadmill would be, how about me walking in environments where I usually might be challenged? So imagine training in a shopping mall or in crowded places. The more I expose myself to those situations, the more our brain learns to deal with them, right? So we can see that obviously, this unfortunately is not as simple as we think, because imagine I have back pain and I can't walk on a treadmill. So in that option, if I have to choose to be more specific to what I'm dealing with, then maybe the bicycle would be a better choice. So throughout the session, we hope to be able to discuss different variations of why it cannot be an answer for 30 seconds. But if everything goes wrong, what I usually say is see what options you have around you, because accessing care is not the easiest thing in the world. So see what options you have and then try to see if we are able to choose the one that's closest to walking or add in something. Lucky for us, walking is actually something that people can access without any tools, right? So before I just continue, is everyone hearing me okay? I tend to have a low voice. Is everything okay? Thank you. I always have my speech therapist say, talk louder. Okay, so we had our 30 seconds. Now, we were seeing that why is this so complex to answer in such a simple way? And basically, I want to show you here a video. I know it's probably going to run slowly, but that's not necessarily bad. And I'm going to take a risk of putting a pointer. So you should be seeing a red dot here on the screen. And so we have 5 people with Parkinson. They're all very young age, but different situations. We have someone in the front that did deep brain stimulation. We have someone very young that just got diagnosed. So what we can see, some common patterns, things that we know happen with gait in Parkinson. Notice how everyone seems to have their heels very close together as they're walking. Everyone catch that? This person, this person, this person. Notice also how the arms tend not to swing as much. In different ways, they're not using their arms. Imagine that if what slows me down, for example, is when I'm doing an additional task, in this case, walking with the phone, my intervention for this person would clearly be different from a different person that you might feel this gentleman might have. The step size is smaller. So the type of exercise I would choose for this person would be completely different than I would choose for this one. With this, I just want to show there's so much variation in how the disease manifests itself, but there are common patterns that we try to address when we are doing rehabilitation, for example. So now, in order for me I have to take you out the laser. So we hope to jump into a different complement of that answer, which would be obviously the best exercise for walking is the one that will improve your specific challenge that you are dealing with while you're walking. So if it is, for example, my arm is not swinging while I'm walking, and that is ultimately influencing my balance, then the type of exercise that I will be focusing on is how can I get that arm to interact while I'm walking? See? So this is when we say more specific. How do I know that this is happening? That obviously is the place where the rehabilitation team, mostly the physiotherapists and occupational therapists might be focusing mostly on this area of gait, a lot of research into it. And what we will do is basically, if we have you in the clinic, we want to see how these different effects of walking are showing up. So what we might torture you by, in this case, I'm just assessing the gentleman about walking. Let me just put it here so I can explain. As he is walking, I'm adding in more and more difficult challenges. So by this, I'm challenging his balance. He becomes slower trying to answer me. And if I do an even harder question, I can see the tremor coming in here in the hand. I can see changes in the posture. And I can see the ultimate effect of what happens in daily life. But this is me trying to mimic those effects, right? So taking the person outside and trying to see, you see how well he's walking outside, good speed, he's getting from A to B without a big issue. And in that little clinical moment, it seems that he has more impairment, right? So sometimes the places, obviously people refer that they have more, often more ease to walk outside than indoors. So the message I just want to pass is we have to go a little bit further than just doing tests on speed or, standing up from a chair, walking 3 meters and coming back doesn't really give me the insight about how the person is compensating, how he's using his body during walking. And that is needed so that I can guide them on the best exercise. Okay? So imagine what the professionals will be doing. They'll be thinking, okay, these are the changes I see, but what is the best evidence that we have at this moment available? What does it say regarding helping someone improve their walking? So ultimately, someone that is obviously a clinician is guided by the best evidence and then by their experience. So I will take a moment here just to show you what exists in terms of evidence, but in a very brief way, or else this would become very dense. There's congresses on gait. You can have 2-3 days where we could be talking about walking. So we're trying to get a little practical and try to give you as much practical information as possible. And then we take this and we think about, okay, so those interventions that exist that we know work or have shown to work in research in different populations, how can we adapt them so that they will benefit this person that I have in front of me that is dealing with this problem? Okay, so this is where we are guiding ourselves towards more personalized health. So here I summarized in a very simple way the interventions that professionals will have access to. And we have lots of research on the use of treadmill training. And I usually say it's because it's just easier to do research in a controlled environment like the treadmill. But it is where we have our strongest evidence. And so 2 key areas is the use of treadmill and also teaching people strategies in queuing. Let me just give you a quick example so it's not me explaining. So as you can see, we tended to evolve from only doing treadmill to understanding that the person might compensate on the treadmill. And so how about we combine it with the cueing? And so cueing is basically a cue that we are giving to the brain about maybe the amplitude or the speed that they're getting. Or even as you can see, my hand is getting that moment in a specific moment of the step. I am just pushing his leg up and then I take it away and then I put it on again. But the person can also do it by himself. The lines are there so they can help the person keep the distance between your feet. But you can have other types of needs. So you can have someone that needs to lift up their knees, for example. And so in this case, We have an elastic on top so to make sure that the person brings up the knee or even stretches out the knee after. So this is what we mean by using cueing in exercise. And these are different examples of how we do it. Please do not try this without any supervision, but I don't honestly think it's very dangerous, but it's just a way for us to get a better amplitude of the movement, to get better patterns overall. This one is particularly interesting if you use these small flippers, because it is impossible for us to not put our heel down first. So imagine the person is dealing with shuffling gait. This is an actually interesting way that I discovered about making the person really lift up the knee. So therapists have to be very creative so that we can make sure that we get the right training when we do it. And I want to tell you that the research on this has grown and grown. This is a very interesting evolution of what can we do on a treadmill. So different training of trying to focus on, can we improve also, other components. So not lots of things that come into the walking. The balance is important. So just having walking in different directions. Again, this is somebody that I know that we work frequently every single week for many years ongoing. So obviously I know the limits that I can go with the person. But just when we are in a time where people are thinking a lot about, vigorous exercise, and sometimes being more specific is probably more beneficial. And with that, I want to alert everyone that I think we tend to sometimes not talk about adverse events and things that can go wrong, because lots of people that I work with ultimately buy a treadmill to have at home so they can do some training. And we try to figure out ways for them to do it better. This is a bad example of someone that actually read about how he should be doing very rigorous exercise and was influenced by the book. And I wanted to show him that when he was doing this video was actually a whole hour. I'm just showing you a glimpse. And the gentleman started out really well. The first 20 minutes, he's doing awesome, good arm swing, step size. And then as the half an hour, 40 minutes come in, 50 minutes come in, because he thought he had to do for an hour, and I was trying to negotiate him to do it more intimate, less. What you can see is his head is very red, right? So we're having autonomic already responses there. His posture is getting worse. He's at risk because sometimes he even actually trips a little bit. So there's a few seconds where one leg does not respond so well. So we don't talk about what's too much exercise, but we should be starting to talk about that so that we can help people, alert them for these things. I always have this question is like, should I be using the handrails? Like as a physiotherapist, what I like to use the treadmill for is to help the person get the best amplitude most of the times. And so that I tend to use the handrails. I think it helps you eliminate the compensations better. So I would erase, or I'm trying to just share with you that maybe using the rails is not necessarily negative, right? It helps you do better movement. And then we had a question regarding heart rate measures. And yes, we have fancy watches now that give us our heart rate, and we do all these calculations. And it's true that people use that to monitor exercise safety regarding cardiovascular benefits. But without going into a lot of depth, you will have access to the slides, so you can then dive deeper into this. I do want to highlight that it's probably not. We are probably going in a direction in research. We're going to realize that it's probably not the best way to measure effort. Because people are taking medication that lower their blood pressure. They have autonomic responses into dysfunction also related to Parkinson. So the one that we usually tend to hear more often is this rating our perceived so how I feel the effort. You might hear things that I can barely breathe and speak only a few words, right? Where do you want to go? Is being able to not say a complete sentence. And this can be either on a treadmill, or it can be, just sitting and standing. It depends on where the person is in terms of their physical capacity. And so this is just a very simple way that people can use so they can know if they're pushing themselves a little bit more. Now, let me go quickly here into, so gait re-education, that's basically training walking and trying to focus on improving the quality of the walking. And then a key word here, which is exercise-based interventions, which is what most of you are probably doing in your communities at this moment. So what does this mean? We have a whole bunch of options in terms of exercise in our communities. Let's just put the videos rolling so we get this energy going. And it's amazing how these options have multiplied. And most of these interventions, these ones have had research to back up the benefits that they might have over physical capacity, but also with what we call outcomes of gait. So we know that even if you train on a bicycle, you will benefit over walking as well. Hydrotherapy, if you do hydrotherapy, you will have benefits over walking as well. Which comes back to my first question is, if I had to choose all of them and I want to focus on my walking, which one would I choose? Right? If I had the option of choosing, I can tell you that the best evidence is at this moment, strongest evidence is for water therapy actually. But you have things that are interesting, like you see the climbing. Imagine the person is dealing with a problem with the posture. So when I'm walking, I tend to lean forward and my posture becomes altered to the point where I might have back pain. So in this case, the climbing is not such a bad idea because it's actually showing out to some good results on improving posture and strength in the back. So as you can see, sometimes we can use different things to get according to the person that we had in front of us. All these interventions, except the Tai Chi in particular, have something in common, which is aerobic component. So they're all good examples of aerobic exercise, and that is the one that has the most solid evidence to be able to benefit you in terms of delaying progression of the disease, improving cognition. So ultimately, don't worry if you think I'm not doing, specifically A or B. The most important thing is that you're doing some sort of aerobic exercise during your week. So this is an example from the questionnaires that people shared with us. Thank you, everyone that answered. The goal of these questionnaires is for us to get a little bit more insight about what people in the group here are dealing with. And this was the question about if you had tried some specific treatments. Now, you saw what the best evidence just showed. And yes, so we have people that are, the word that came up most was physical therapy, where we associate the training of walking, treadmill. Yes, okay. And then we have the Lee Silman big program that I will have some examples there in a while. So I'll show you that for who's not aware of that program. But you have other things. You have like strengthening, you have stationary, elliptic. So all these were perceived as things that were improving walking. So now we come to the question of, so how do I know what to do? We see all these options, or according to what I'm doing, what can I add in more? And this is where we'd like to share some knowledge with you. It's like, let's try to see if we can capacitate people to be able to identify their specific challenges when they are walking. And this was one of the questions that we placed in the questionnaire. And based on if you are able to identify, then you are able to then seek better guidance on what you should be working towards. So these were the results when we asked this question: what are the main challenges that you have difficulty when you're walking? And the results came more, so there was more reference regarding balance. The number one difficulty that people were having while walking in this group was balance. Then was fatigue. Then was freezing gait, which is the sensation of the feet being glued to the floor in specific moments, and we'll get into that. The posture, pain, walking pattern, so it's like the way I'm walking, mood, and then there was personal issues. So can you see the list is enormous. So for me to say this is the best exercise for walking, really is, we have to run away from that, because there can't be one answer when you have so many things that can be happening. Does that make sense to everyone? So if I have pain while I'm walking, the type of exercise that I will be focusing on will be different than if I have balance problems. Let's dive deep into an example of each one of them. So, and with the hope that it might help you reflect on how you can identify and use some of these things to improve. So we had 51% of the people, 52, that were focusing on what I would like to do is to walk better with better balance. And we have to have the notion that balance is on its own a very complex topic. But, and I'm going to do this in a very simple way. The comments that people answered were feeling at times off balance. The most frequent word was balance, and then fear of falling, difficulties with balance, high risk of falling backwards, which tends to be less common in Parkinson specifically, but in the initial diagnosis, sometimes people tend to give a little steps backwards. So, okay. Lack of balance, short strides, freezing. So this is someone that identified several problems that were happening with their gait. Another person said balance, fatigue, curling under the toes. Curling under the toes, that could be either directly related to time of medication, or it can actually be a compensation for balance. So when we have different strategies to keep our body balanced against gravity, and one of them is curling the toes. Okay, then we have want to walk with better balance as a goal. So with these comments, I was reflecting on how can we give useful information that can maybe help all. Let's go back into thinking what could be influencing balance in that video that I showed you, right? You had 5 different people, that's true, but there were very common patterns. So can we come down to thinking, okay, so for balance, what was influencing mostly the balance from that analysis that we saw was how common it was for them to have their heels close together. So sometimes people might say, no, I do have my feet apart, but I said it's the space between your heels that tends to be shorter. And even when you're walking, you think you're taking long steps, big steps, but the space between the heels continues. It's almost you're walking like on a line. And this has to be identified, and we have to be helping people to understand how they can bypass. Now let's think about it. So what's making this happen? Let's go back in I'll call it a snowball. So lots of things could be answered, but directly related that has been identified is the fact that the trunk tends to rotate less, and we need it to move. We need the trunk to have, so that we can have a good biomechanics of the whole body as we take a step. If this happens, and this has been identified that influences, okay, so what can be influencing the trunk being more rigid, right, and not moving so much? And what we can identify clearly from the videos, as I said, just a simple looking at videos, we have that the arm swing tends to be reduced in Parkinson's, specifically on one side, the most affected side. And so this, it's actually one of the symptoms that take many people to the doctor as a first diagnose. That takes people to the doctor. Okay, so let's think about what could be influencing the arm swing. And here we're getting closer to the core symptoms of Parkinson's disease, right? So we have bradykinesia, which is slowing down of movement, which is the number one symptom that has to exist in Parkinson. And then we have the rigidity as well. And curious enough, in this study, we saw that the rigidity contributed more to the reduced arm swing. Now, if we think about, obviously, what would come before this would be Parkinson provokes bradykinesia and provokes rigidity. And then you also have the other symptoms like tremor and balance issues. But these are the top 2. So what influences most rigidity thinking of things that you might be able to control. And this is where we find that being able to share this with you, when we are doing or another task while we are standing, walking, doing all things that used to be automatic, and then suddenly I'm doing something else, like I'm getting out from a chair and I'm talking, and for some reason I don't use the right movements and I fall back, right? Or I'm walking and I'm talking with someone and suddenly I'm not moving my arm. So we know that there is a direct effect about alternating our attention, and this is where the cognition impacts movement. And the focus in his last maybe 10 years on this has been extreme about how it influences the rigidity in bradykinesia. Okay, so if we think this is our snowball, and I wanted to reinforce this one particularly because then it's sometimes it's hard for people to see the direct influence. This gentleman is walking. Normally he has his arms are swinging, he has good speed. Even the room is small, but he's doing really good. And then I start asking him, similar to the other gentleman, I start asking him a cognitive task. And I'm making him talk at the same time. And you can see how the immediate effects, this is on how he's compensating, how he's slowing down, how he's stopping. It's just it's just a lovely video to show the impacts of when we used to do this very automatic, but now unfortunately, because gait is not so automatic due to the Parkinson disease, then these things have a greater interference, right? Dividing our attention with other things. And if we take this too much, the person can really stop and block, right? So we come back to, okay, so again, what can I do about this? So we have the snowball. Can we influence it somehow? Do we have control over this? Yes, we do. There are several things that you can do for dual task training. So this is in the world of exercise and rehabilitation. You have the option of doing just physical training, which is, like the dancing, the boxing, or the boxing is more cognitive as well, or purely cognitive training. Speech therapists tend to also do a lot of cognitive training, and occupational therapists too.
Yeah.
And then obviously this word that I'm sure all of you are very familiar, that you've been hearing in the last 5 years, a lot about dual task training. And I honestly believe that dual task training, which is the combination of cognitive and movement into exercises, can be applied to any exercise modality, right? It's how creative the people that are with you. So the greatest example of dual task training is the boxing, because that's when you add in the sequences and the cognition. But dance has lots of effects over cognition because of also the attention required to stay focused on the changing movements. So this is just a slide to give you this something that we can do about. We've got 5 with the OT options that we can influence the snowball, right? How about we go down our list, our sequence for the rigidity in the bradykinesia? Interesting. Obviously, the medication is considered highly efficacious for controlling the rigidity and the bradykinesia in Parkinson. So we are fortunate to have medication that are effective. And then we have, obviously, there's a combination of symptoms. And so the medication sometimes, other types of medication might be more challenging. What we know from research, this amplitude and speed-based mobility movements that you will hear often, the most common program known is Lee Silman Voice Therapy Big program, which is some images that you see there. It's just basically doing big movements. There are most of the exercises that therapists do will be with this focus on amplitude, will be on this focus on speed. And if everything goes well, they will be updated on the necessity of adding cognition, so they'll add in cognition as well. So those are the 3 ingredients that should be present in any of the exercises that you do. And then obviously we have examples of water and dance and stuff. So this is how in direct research that has shown effects over the rigidity in bradykinesia. And obviously what influences it, I have to add it in. So if dual tasking is the thing that makes you slow, If I train it, that means the interference, how much it makes me slow, will be reduced. How about arm swing? So we add in those that we just talked about, and how about something specific, which is if I tell my arm to move, it will move, right? So everyone has that experience. My arm is not moving. If I have Parkinson, it's not moving, but if I think about my arm, it will move. So this is what we call like cognitive strategies, thinking about it, finding ways for people to get that reminder that it has to be. But this requires more cognition, right? So this used to be automatic. You didn't think about it, and now unfortunately you have to think about it in order for it to come out well, which can be very exhausting at the end of the day. And then, so we need to be able to also train it. We need to have exercises that will reinforce how you're moving your arms, so that we make it less cognitive for you. Let's take this example here. And this is a woman from the US, and she came in for us to do this whole assessment of walking. What can I do to improve my Parkinson? And we are observing the walking. The speed is relatively good. Again, you have that focus on the heels, you see, even with good steps. But what was influencing most her gait was the fact that her right arm is not interacting. So it's the right arm swing, which is making the trunk more rigid, which makes her balance more to the side, which give this sensation that she's losing her balance. So what can we do about it? How about we try different things? What we did is, how about we just change where you use your bag and let your arm free? So it seems simple enough, right? And look how well it moves, right? It's just whoosh, moving. So the bag was actually just blocking it. And then can we think more? What if we didn't have a bag and we had a little suitcase? And we could also think about other strategies, like why not have a water bottle in your most affected side that reminds you to be able to push it forward, up and down, right? Forward and back. So ultimately we get here in the middle, and this is what we say, teaching people different strategies, and they train it during walking, and that's how you improve the walking. But now let's think, can this be more exercisey, if the term exists? And this is an idea that I often share with people, that I think it's a lovely way for people to train, not at the speed that these gentlemen are doing, but unfortunately I don't have a better video. But it's just a question of using the poles and the sticks for in a different way that really stimulates that movement of the arm. Of course, I'm using this example of pole walking or Nordic walking, according to the country where you live, because it's just a way for us to remind us to use our arms. But I do like the tendon one much better. Yeah. It has more global.
Very good reciprocal motion for that, for sure.
Mm. So we going down our snowball, and we have reduced trunk motion. So the trunk is more rigid, and so we think about, we have all the list of things that we already thought about. So the further we go back on what causes the problem, the more influence we will have, right? That makes sense to you? But let's see what we can do specifically for this one. Is just adding in exercises for the trunk rotation. And this is also where you will see a lot of the amplitude movements, even movements on the floor. Pilates and yoga tend to be well received as having benefits over the trunk rigidity. The pool, for sure. Just going inside the pool and walking and coming back and getting out will have an influence immediately. And obviously the dance, if it's something that you are able to enjoy, because if you're not enjoying the dance, it usually increases. Okay, narrow base, what can we add in? And that is really reinforcing, knowing that the heels are together. How can I train this and maybe have a line and put one foot on each side and try to, around my garden, maybe you have space in your house where you can put a line and you can try to do a little walk and training, specifically thinking about this. And yes, I finished there on our sequence. Does this make sense to everyone? Everyone doing okay?
I've been monitoring it, but it's just most
Yep.
of the comments, so there's no questions
Oh,
now.
good. So inside the other problems, let's just quickly dive into, that was the major one, so that's why it took a little bit longer. But let's think about tips and tricks that maybe if you're dealing more with posture related to the walking. So people that perceived that it was because of their posture that they weren't walking so well. Just quick tips that I can give you is people tend to tell me I do like 1 hour of walk, and then at the end I feel discomfort in my back or my posture. Again, if you saw that gentleman on the treadmill, that means that I wouldn't say overdo it. After a certain period of time, these compensations that set in also related to the fatigue, right? As you get tired. So by logic, if I stop more often, I can have these moments where I reset my posture. So it's much more efficient to stop. Maybe, who knows? It depends on you. You see the time where you feel that the compensations are coming in, and maybe choose a little time before. That would be to just stop for 10 seconds, correct your posture, and restart. So it doesn't have to break down your rhythm, because you might feel this is going to break down my aerobic component. Not necessarily. It will help you endure longer. Using reducing external distractions. So if you really want to have less compensations, remember how the cognition affects. So if I'm walking and talking with someone, probably my posture will be more influenced. And so just thinking about how can I negotiate with whoever I'm walking, that maybe during a certain specific time, we will maybe just talk with ourselves in our heads or listen to the birds. So the other tip will be external support, which is it helps the person have a reference where they are in space. It reduces the needs for compensations. If even just using one Nordic stick is enough to give you that reference. And yes, we do have lots of, we have research to support that using the poles will help you do a probably better quality of walking.
I remember a long time ago when I was in Colorado, the husband and wife, and the husband had Parkinson's. And they would notice when they would go on the walks that if they would talk a lot, he would get slower and it would slow everything down. And eventually they got into a routine, and he actually eventually got to poles. But just the walking while talking became an early point where they could actually recognize that influence pretty readily.
But I think if we have like daily talks, that's what we do as humans, right? We interact. So it's a question of just having one, and maybe it will help you. But yeah.
Walking and talking to me is the original tool.
The same effect that you have like of auditory cueing. So if I'm walking and I'm listening to specific music, it will help me even walk faster. It will help me to walk even better. Right? So we can use these cues to help us also. How about fatigue? So also a significant group of people that wanted to a longer distance. So without fatigue, this was an issue. And the way people described it was feeling fatigue due to muscles not strong in the upper back. I get tired very after a couple of blocks. So again, there is my back begins to hurt. It was things that I just discussed with you. And then off time of medication. So being aware that I don't think it's something that people can control all the time, because you start maybe doing your exercise, and then it comes to the time of the medication. Maybe that's the time that you have to do the exercise, but just being mindful that your body is working against the resistance of not having dopamine in the system. So it might be more challenging, and more compensations will tend to happen if you're exercising while the medication is not having an effect. So if you are able to manage that in doing it in on time, it's better. And on means when the medication is effective. So one of the things for like fatigue, remember, there's lots of tips and tricks that I could tell you, but I'm choosing just something that can stick, and which is just incorporating daily walking as an exercise. Because sometimes people might be doing 3 times a week boxing and twice a week dancing. And then we might not think walking as an exercise. It's just, I just went for a conversation down the neighborhood with someone, but it can be, and it should be the number one that represents what you want to improve if you are dealing with walking issues. And this is just an example from someone that was very young, got diagnosed, and she said, this is the easiest thing that I can do every day. We did ask the group if if they had walking incorporated as I was curious to see if walking as regular as part of their routines, and we had several people that said yes, that they tried to walk maybe 2 miles every day. Using the dog is a beautiful example for walking as well. Hopefully you can control him and not the opposite. And then most of the days not in group classes. I walk in my neighborhood. That's good. It's indoors or outdoors. Can we really train walking inside doors? Yes, of course. Remember, what we most want is for people to reduce the number of hours they are sitting. So walking to the kitchen and coming back is also valid. These were occasional that would eventually once a week or twice a week that they would do it. And some concerns regarding the weather. Let's see the no. So no, some people said no, not at this point. There can be interruptions if you're recovering from knee surgery, as this is an example. Okay, so considering stuff for daily walks, if I'm thinking about endurance, right? I'm thinking about getting less fatigued when I go out, is reminding you of these resting breaks, which resting breaks can be ultimately 20 seconds, just stopping and resetting. Ideally, even just leaning against, I don't know, in this case, a tree or something. Just giving a reference to the brain that, you know what, everything's okay. Here I am in space. Now let's continue, right? So reassuring safety to the brain that you might not proceed is good. And then we have also been realistic, because sometimes people go on hikes and they go from A to B and they forget that they have to come back to A, and then things go wrong, right? So it's unfortunately, it's very often that I hear that. So it's just the going to extremes, and then the feeling that you get after these hikes, the experience is not going to be positive. So your motivation might be influenced by that. If you live in Portugal, I can share like people, because of religious walks, that they go to some Compostela, so they walk for days.
Yeah.
And we will have that experience this year, and I hope to survive. Okay, so thinking now on mood, so some people reported that they would like to use the walking to boost their mood. And the words that we used were apathy. Just getting out of the door was quite a challenge. Just having that motivation to go and walk. Especially if we think about, okay, I'm going to the gym, I'm going to go do something specific. So the way I'm looking at walking, and this is why I'm highlighting that we should look at it in a different way, that I'm going to go for my daily walk. It might not seem like exercise if we don't perceive it, the motivation will be influenced. And someone else often don't feel like it. Lots can be behind us. These are things from the research that I found curious to share with you, that maybe choosing the environments, if we are dealing with more emotional issues, it seems there has been research to support that if we walk in nature, we have more benefits than walking in the city, which would seem pretty logical.
Yeah.
But again, it's validated by research, which is kind of funny that humans would invest time in studying this, which is good. It's for building better cities for the future.
Well, it's just that there's like, I don't recognize any of these researchers, and they're like, oh, it's a journal that I've never read.
Yes, it's
Actually,
specific to Parkinson. It's things we know, and then obviously Parkinson.
To get outside of the Parkinson's world a little bit.
Yeah, so it's like this quote that I found interesting that the person shared in the questionnaire. I like to walk with friends that understand the problem, but I slow them down, so I tell them to go ahead, and they will, but they feel guilty. Very interesting perception. I think what we could say to those friends is maybe you can circle back, so they can make even more rounds, and not an easy. It's the most social impact of the slowness of the movement. But I don't know the person. The tips, I hope one of the tips works, and you can get your Nordic sticks and you can outrun them all.
Yeah.
In the next walk. If we're thinking about mood, people tend to have different takes on if I want to walk with someone or not, right? If you're more of an introvert, I guess you probably want to be more alone with your thoughts. And so just reminding that for emotional purposes, it's good if we are in groups. People tend to say like having a buddy to go with helps in the motivation. It also influences the walking. So here you've got 4 people with Parkinson. And what you can see, the gentleman on the right, he's more rigid. And he's actually the gentleman that you saw in the video before. And that's because he's dealing with balance. So he's actually not able to interact with the conversation because of his balance. So even if they were planning to have a social moment, it's not so good for if someone can't really interact with you while you're doing it. Okay, so another topic that I want to tell anyone that's dealing here with freezing, that we will later in our program do a specific program on exercises for freezing, because it's such a complex topic component of gait that even there's even converses only on freezing. Right?
One coming up right now in Emory.
So you have like three days of discussing freezing. You can see how complex it is. But let me summarize it in what people mentioned is having some hesitation. So freezing is having moments where the feet don't seem to respond to what you want them to. And the first person was when the Parkinson medication is due. So there is freezing in off and freezing in on, which is freezing when the medication is not working or working. And I would say that's an easier one to deal with, because that just means that we need to contact the neurologist and adjust the medication, and it tends to respond to adjustments of medication. We have other difficulties. So when I stand or turn around while trying to enter an elevator or cross the street, narrow spaces, opening doors, anxiety when someone holds the door, fear and they're waiting for you to pass. I see that one often. Fear that I might fall. An example of washing dishes at the counter, which I would imagine would be about turning and putting the dishes away. So this is a complex slide, but it's just to show that it's very targeted in terms of what the neurologist, if you report this problem, what they should be thinking of. This is a guidance for clinicians, where they have to think about how can I adjust the medication so I can help the person deal with this problem. And as you can see already in the medical guidance, there is indication for physiotherapy that is specific and can help you with strategies for this. I want to show this quickly as I give you ideas. There are I'd say different types, or subtypes, what we call subtypes of freezing, and for each one of them, the way that I would create exercises would be different. So if this is someone that is crossing a doorway, the most likely exercise that I would do would be try to see how many doors I have in the gym and trying to pass those doors, or trying to make them smaller, or try to add in complexity while it's crossing the doorways. So I will create something specific for that difficulty. Turning. So some hesitations in quick turning. That means we're going to try to reproduce exercises, I don't know, like throwing a ball against the wall and then turning around and trying to catch it. Can you see? Please do not try that at home without measuring the right safety. But it's an example that the therapist will create exercises so that you can be even more specific to whatever freezing you might have. Besides the use and teaching of all the cueing that we have. So this one, for example, I want to take a first step and it doesn't seem to go. There's lots of tricks that we teach the person to take a step backwards and then go forward, sideways and then go forward. So all these tricks, they do tend to help, but it is important to still exercise those moments and to challenge the person in those moments. But to simplify things that you might have control over, this was actually a research paper that just came out last year, and it's amazing to compare 10 different interventions that people are doing in their community. And the one that had best results for freezing of gait was doing strength and resistance training, aqua, which was water therapy, and dams. So as you can see, those were the top 3 that showed benefits. Okay, so thinking about pain, let's see. When we're thinking, we actually had a talk last week regarding pain. So if you want to, and then just building on that, let me just see what people were complaining about. Or
I'm sorry, I think I might have moved it. There you go.
Aha, okay. So some of the things that people mention is like how to be safe doing lots of walking as Parkinson patient with lower back stenosis and arthritis and foot pain. And the person is already obviously having some guidance on using, custom orthosis or having them. So it's something that the person is already managing.
especially with like rheumatoid arthritis or something like that, which is not that uncommon in Parkinson's,
Yeah.
and a lot of breakdown in the extremities.
I would think the trick I usually, well, the strategy I use most is like if you can film that you're walking, like if I'm working with someone while you are at home or doing, common things or common training so that we can look at it. And as we did here in the exercises before, is trying to identify ways that you could make, you could improve the quality of the movement. So imagine that even though, so low back pain probably will get worse if your posture is changing. Can we do something about the posture and help you in this specific situation? So it's, as I say, it requires some further studying about what could we change based on what is happening. I did find interesting this when walking through pain, including knee, hip, and plantar fasciitis. And what I think about pain here is if you start moving and the pain starts reducing, that's good. That means it's responding to movement, and then you can say, I'm working through the pain. But I think please be alerted if you are walking and it's increasing. This is a sign of your body telling you that something is wrong, right? So I know the people have different types of pain perception, can endure pain in different ways. Women tend to be much better. We have children, so that's why. But just to know that you might be someone that feels really strong, and I'm just gonna live through this pain. But there's probably something that we can do at 70%, whatever you're doing, that can be reduced so that you can work better without the pain. And yes, I'm almost getting to the end. So it's just, there were other things that people mentioned, like the weather. Alternatives for the weather. I think we gained a lot after COVID, which is all the response that you can get maybe from technology, and people tend to have options, a lot of exercise options online. For walking, it's quite challenging to give. We do exercises online and to be able to help improve the walking. But again, coming back to knowing that what ultimately influences people's speed, the way they use their body could be like cognitive or just physical capacity. And that is possible to do. That is possible to do online. So don't lose hope on that. And then finding time to do it. This is also an interesting one because I used to always think that how do we organize time? But the truth is the daily activities consume more and more time as Parkinson progresses. So it's normal that people might feel challenged to fit in exercise. But I'm sure everyone's being tortured about how they should be fitting in exercise from every health professional. Everything is so. I'm sure this person will find the way. And yes, the rest is all more or less about shorter strides, feeling that the walking is shrinking, and there are changes there are continuous changes of walking throughout the disease progression, and hopefully you can be active and be on top of the changes that are happening and fight the best that you can against them. There were a couple of questions, and I found this one very interesting, which is how to participate in a wheelchair. So imagine if we have someone that wants to do exercise for walking. What I understood from the question was, if I want to improve my walking, but I'm in a wheelchair, what type of exercise would I do? As a clinician, we would start by assuming a standing position, seeing how safe the person can be in standing. So if you have someone that has severe impairment with maybe a typical Parkinsonism, and just being in the standing position is already an exercise on its own, right? So it's not me running a marathon that is equivalent to exercise. It's whatever challenges me. And so being mindful that there's lots of exercises that people can do even in a wheelchair that will challenge you for your specific physical capacity. So don't feel like that you might be missing out because everyone else is doing, I don't know, running on a treadmill or walking or boxing or jumping, or is what you need will probably be something different.
There's a question in the chat that says, are there reasons not to use walking poles?
I think there can definitely, you could get used to them. Which means once I start using them, then I wouldn't say I'm trying to run away from addicted, but then in order for you to feel safe, you'll probably always want to wear them, use them. So there could be. You know that the research, when it's published, everything's very positive. It's very unlikely that someone will go study all the negative ways for not using something, unless you really have something against polls that you do that study.
There is a large
So-
anti-soul lobby out there that's floating up opposition now.
Yeah. No, they're actually people. I have had discussions about this where we tend to think if it helps you compensate you, it's like using a walker. Imagine we take away the poles, you use a walker. And I start using when do I start using a walker or some sort of support? I use it because I feel out of balance, and it is efficacious for me to use it. Do we ever discuss when do people stop using a walker? So imagine you broke your foot and you need the support for walking, and you use a walker for a while, and then you start having periods where you stop using it, right? So I think it would be the effect of letting go or reducing the amount of times that you need it. But yeah.
I still find the poles, I use them a lot
So
in other classes too. I just get it for breath and posture and everything. I think they're for a lot of good uses. I'm sure there's a dependency issue you might worry about.
I'm not actually like completely in love with them because I don't think the arms move so much. So if you you give me a couple of seconds, I'll find you a whole list of not to use them. Which means sometimes I have people that feel a little bit out of balance and they use them for support for balance. So that means that it's not like it's limiting their use of their arms. But again, it's because they need it. They need that support.
Might interfere with your ability to do Zumba. So maybe that's
not necessary. We could know that word. But
to Zumba.
It's a good idea. I'll use it in a post.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
There was another question, which was, are there simple exercises to build up leg strength? And the simplest one is to sit and stand. Okay, so this one wasn't difficult to answer here because it's sitting and standing and squats is something that we do throughout the day. So mimicking as closely as possible what type of strength you need in your legs. It's getting out of the toilet. It's getting out of the a sofa. It's getting out of the car, right? So it's training in different variations and challenging you, and then trying to understand if it's really the strength that's stopping you from doing something. And then someone asked, I would like to know, the goals for the session was to know what others were doing. And yes, we're happy to share. This is what everyone was doing in terms of physical activity. Probably 20 years ago, this would be almost empty slide. So it's amazing to see how much people are engaging in exercise and feeling motivated. Walking seems to be reasonable if we want to improve walking. That was a key message for today. Lots of evidence regarding boxing, dancing, and dancing specifically, and water aerobics. But that doesn't mean that other types of exercises won't help you, like yoga. Like imagine if you have a lot of trunk rigidity or postural, and then you had your yoga and you feel that you walk better. So ultimately, we can't say this one's the best. What is the best for you?